Gloria Suen is the 2012 and 2014 Women's International Yoga Asana Champion. She is the only two-time winner of the Bishnu Ghosh Cup. As a former high school track and cross-country runner, dedicated road racer, and two-time marathon finisher, mileage had caught up to her body, and Gloria decided to look for a lower impact physical activity that would not sacrifice in intensity. Yoga seemed like a good idea. Upon moving to Singapore in 2008 for work, a former colleague connected Gloria with her champion cousin, Kay Ha, who had also just moved there to teach Bikram yoga. About 3 weeks after she started practicing, Kay convinced her to sign up for a yoga championship, taking place 6 months later. Thus, the championship has been an integral part to her yoga journey from both physical and spiritual aspects. Welcome, Gloria Suen. You're listening to Jeff Chen on Pure Yoga Talk on Pure Yoga TV.
Thank
Hello.
you. Hello.
All right. This is one of the series of yoga talks that we're doing with former yoga asana champions like yourself back in those old days and kind of discovering where they are today.
Yeah, it seems like just like yesterday,
Absolutely,
right? But
yes. When all the
it's
fun and
been,
games were happening and people were just kind of playing yoga,
yeah.
right? So thanks, Gloria, for spending the time with us. The thing we'd like to talk about first is your yoga path. Everybody has their unique yoga path. So tell all the listeners how you started out with yoga.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, when I moved to Singapore, I was kind of looking for something new to do physically because I think the marathon training caught up to my Achilles and I couldn't run anymore at that time. So, um, when my friend Ben recommended that I meet her cousin Kay, and she said, he's some kind of yoga champion. He really likes to eat. So I think you guys will get along anyway. So just call him. so, so I got in touch with Kay. He welcomed me to take his class. I did not know what kind of yoga he would taught. So basically, when I showed up to the studio, I realized it was Bikram hot yoga.
All right. So
So
that was
that
your
was,
first class with Kay.
yes, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I guess him knowing you or knowing you knowing his cousin kind of made an instant connection. He kind of forced you to come back.
Yeah, well, I actually signed up for a 1 week pass because the Singapore studio was, I think, compared to the US, fitness there is slightly more expensive to join a gym or a studio. So it was like $100 for a 1 week or $40 a class, Singapore. So being conscious, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do the 1 week pass, and I'm gonna come every single day for 1 week to make the most use of my money. So
Mhm.
yeah, my first class, I wore pants and sports bra and a shirt. The shirt came off by I think eagle pose. Usually, that's when newcomers start to feel hot. And I thought, what did I get myself into? But after class, I felt pretty good. Although I was supposed to go back and see his. He had a demo for his birthday later that day at the studio, and I never made it back because I fell asleep. He never lets me forget it to this day. But yeah, I went back basically every day that first week, and every day I went back, I felt a little bit better. And after class, I just felt so clean. Like you're mentally, physically, just. It was the first time I kind of felt something that made me feel as good as running.
Wow.
So
So it was like the value proposition kind of forced you to get hooked,
yeah.
right? That sounds like my mom. My mom was 70 years old when she started in California, and she did one of these intro months. It was like $30 for 30 days, and she went every single day because she wanted to get the most mileage out of her $30. I said,
Yeah.
Mom, that's kind of crazy, but I'm happy you did it. So she stuck with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Singapore, though, is super, super humid,
Yeah.
right? So I can imagine that those studios were extra hot and humid.
They were, but also in Singapore, as in a lot of Asia, studios are in malls. So the mall is air conditioned. I don't exactly know how, maybe there it might be different, but you're basically in an air conditioned mall
Oh, okay.
most of the time. But
Mhm.
I did. It's funny because when I used to hang out with a lot of the yoga teachers there, and when we go outside, they would complain how hot and humid it is, and I said, "You guys spend all day in a hot room,"
Yeah.
and they're like, "I don't mind being hot in a hot room," but
It's intentional.
yeah,
So, Singapore, you were there for work,
yeah.
so you must be a pretty accomplished professional in your work in order to get to Singapore. That's no joke.
Yeah, so I did my MBA in Switzerland, and after that, I always had this vision of working overseas for a bit. So I found a job in Singapore and relocated there.
But now, I think you grew up in Hawaii, right?
Correct.
Grew up
Yeah.
in here. So tell us about, like, you grew up in Hawaii and then blah blah blah. Where did you bop around?
So I grew up in Hawaii, went to college in Philadelphia, then moved to New York, lived there for 8 years, and then went to Switzerland for a year for school, then went to Singapore, and during that time that I was in Singapore, I got into the yoga championships. In 2012, I realized that I wanted to come back to the U.S., so came back to the U.S. But then also, since I won the championship that summer, I took some time and did a tour around the world for a year.
Oh.
So I bopped around, landed back in New York. Um, Another, I guess, 8 years or so, and then I moved to Dallas area.
The Big D right now, which is where we are. So we're here in Dallas, Texas, at Pure Yoga Texas, in Pure Yoga Dallas, right near SMU campus. And Gloria finished a class this morning. So you still maintain your practice, which is wonderful to see,
Yep.
right? And that's what, almost a dozen years later,
Yes.
more than a
Yeah.
dozen years later. More than, well, you started in 2008. So now, let's see. So Hawaii, did you grow up on the, was it Oahu or the Big Island or where?
Oahu.
Oahu.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then is that where you were running a lot or?
So in high school, I started running track. Um, I did long distance, so 1600, 100 meters.
Okay.
And I started out not very good. I just did it because my friends were running track, so I wanted to hang out with my friends. And as I progressed through the years, it kind of I like the challenge of I started out. I think the first year, maybe I came in like second to last in a race, and then every single year I'd improve and I'd get to see my miles times decrease, and I'd get faster. And like by my senior year, I didn't quite break 12 minutes for 2 miles, but I got 12:01. And
Whoa.
so that was for me a big accomplishment. I think in the big, scheme of things, it's not super fast, but for me, like coming from the 16-minute 2 mile run, it was a big accomplishment.
So that's like seeing
Um,
like incremental improvement and like something you're able to stick with, and that's in your personality, right? And that probably is something that translated well in the training for your yoga
yeah, yeah,
championships. I'll bet.
yes, definitely. And I think the you know, athletics in high school and the mentality of training definitely carries over to anything in life, and also the yoga championships. Like when I competed, it was more about what I could do with my posture more than actually winning. So I would say like, okay, let's see if I can do this posture, and that the championship gave me a focus to say, okay, I have X amount of time until the next performance to be able to perfect that, or to feel comfortable enough to do it on stage. So yeah, it was,
So when you so tell us in the early days. So like in 2008, you get introduced to Bikram hot yoga. You find out that there's a yoga championship somewhere 6 months later, and Kay convinces you or bullies you into saying, but we both know Kay very well. He says, you're going to do this. And did you have any initial doubts, or what went through your mind?
Um, I think so. I found out about it because I went into the studio one day and the poster went up about the championship. And I said, like most people, like, oh, you can compete in yoga? What is this about? And Kay said, oh, yeah, you should do it. He's like, you can hang out with us on the weekends because we'll train, and it's 6 months from now, so you have time, and you just have to do 7 postures. I didn't know anything about it, and I was like, okay, well, I think being comfortable with the idea of competition or like having a race, because training for a marathon, you have to prepare at least 6 months in advance to be able to perform on that marathon stage. And so I thought it was kind of the same thing with the yoga competition. So yeah, I didn't know what postures I was gonna do, but at that time the routine was 7 postures. 5 of them are in the beginning class, and then 2 optionals. So I already knew that 5 out of the 7 I could I could do, right? Like you're doing every day in class, every time you go to class, and then it was just about, okay, what can I do on the other two? So Kay just picked 2 postures for me.
Do you remember
He's
what they
like,
were?
what did I do? Full camel and maybe crane.
Okay.
Not a very good crane. And then yeah, so I think the most challenging for me going in was standing head to knee and like balancing and standing head to knee. And he told me, okay, every day before you go to bed, you have to do 5 standing head to knees before you can go to bed. So,
And you did it.
yeah.
So it takes a good student, right? I think to become a yoga champion. Like it's through routine and discipline and repetition.
Yeah.
Right? And when did you meet? So that was Keha. He was like one of your early on influences, and then it was somewhere along the line, Dev Kapil, kind of entered the fray. Tell
Yeah.
us about that.
So Dev competed that first year in 2008 as well. And I think he found out about the competition through another yoga teacher in Singapore. And that teacher told him to go see Kay, he'll coach you. So Dev used to come and show up to the studio to, like, he took class once, and I think I practiced next to him, and I'm like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Like, his postures are amazing, right? And he's been practicing since he was 2 years old. So he would come and do our like routine practice sessions. So that's how I met Dev. Um, and then when Kay was in Singapore, I think till 2009 or 10. And at that point, Dev was also opening his own studio. So when Kay left Singapore, I kind of lost my like key teacher there, let's say. And so I'll still do Bikram. Like Singapore had a big group of traveling teachers that came through, and they were all amazing. So I was really blessed to get exposed to a lot of different teachers, a lot of experienced teachers, a lot of like just very great teachers and practitioners of Bikram yoga. So then on the side, I would go to Dev's studio and take classes from him and some of his other teachers as well. And so that's how I started training with Dev.
Training with Dev.
Yeah.
And Dev, I know, was like a yoga competition guy in India, and in India they had all kinds of yoga competition, and I remember him hearing about this
Yeah.
and joining that because in India he did so many of them, and the way they would do it was somewhat different, right?
Yeah.
And they would hold postures really for a long time,
Yeah.
a long time. But for him, I remember him, like you, the biggest challenge was that standing head to knee,
Yeah.
that standing balancing posture, because that's such a unique posture that not many people have that. And they don't do that India. It's a
Yeah.
Bikram yoga invention, right? So I remember watching him on stage, and that first year was pretty tough for him. But he could, put his head between his legs, backward bending. So it was
Yeah.
really a very different style you could
Yeah.
see. Right? So you learned from him. You got coached from him for several more years.
Yes. Yeah. And he actually had me go to Hong Kong to compete in another yoga championship that they were doing there that was more, I'm not sure if it's probably maybe more in how they compete in India, but they were just like posture groups, and you had to do something that was like a back bend, do a stretching pose, do an arm balancing. But really, there they would say, okay, do the posture, and then you had to hold it until they were satisfied that they had the score. So
Really?
that's a very different, mentality, because you're like, don't know how long they're gonna hold you for. And then there was, as you progressed through it, it'd be like the women's competition. They had different age groups, and then the final was like, okay, all the age groups together on stage, and you all had to do the posture at the same time. So they'd say like, okay, arm balance, go, and everyone
Does
went
an
to the
arm balance.
posture, and then the judges would walk around and do their thing, and then when they're satisfied, they were like, okay, you can come out. Okay, you can come out.
Whoa.
So that was an experience.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And there, in that competition, were there a lot of people from India there, or is it mostly like people from Hong Kong or Asia?
All over Asia,
All over Asia.
yeah, and including India,
Okay.
yeah.
And so that's a totally different experience. So how long would you have to hold a posture for, like an arm balance, if you were to estimate?
Not longer than a minute,
Mm,
but it could be like 30 to 45 seconds.
yeah.
You're there.
Yeah. Yeah. So totally different experience, I guess.
Yeah.
Then, so you do that sometime in what, 2010, 2011, in that
Probably
ballpark?
2010, 2011, yeah,
All right.
around there.
So then finally, then 2012 is when you, I guess, all these experiences accumulate, and then you end up winning the 2012 Bishnu Charan Ghosh Cup. And I remember watching that, and everybody was, there was like a lot of hush when you came up on stage, and everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, look at that!" And I think you did some of the first. You were like one of the first to do certain things, at that time, if you recall.
Yeah, I think I did. What was is it Om pose and bow like peacock?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was a stunner. I think you sort of came in. You came in. You were like, I don't know what the phrase is, but you just came out of the blue, right? And just
Yeah.
and just won it, and everybody was kind of shocked.
Well, I think when
That's cool.
I competed 2008, my first year, and I went to internationals, and everybody was just so amazing, and I
Hmm.
was like in awe. And Kay said, "Don't even think about it. You're not going to win anyways. So just go up there and do your thing." And then, yeah, the following year I got a little bit better. I mean, it's amazing. I practiced a lot of yoga during those 4 years. Like I went before work, so 6:30 a.m. class. I'd go to work, and then after work I'd go back again. And sometimes, like, and then all weekends I would pretty much spend at the studio. So I think for me, when I look back at this period, it's like if you put your mind to something, like anything in life, and you do it consistently every day, you can progress so much. And I think, even between my first and second year, like my first year, Kay's like, no way you're even gonna make top 10. Like, nobody's gonna know who you are, and like, blah, blah, blah. And then the following year, I came in third. And I think that was kind of like probably the first year that people are like, oh, who's
Who's
this?
this
She
one?
came out of the blue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So then when you're doing this and training them for these 4 years, going early morning and then afterwards, were you doing it because it was fun, or were you also doing it just because you were driven, because you saw that you were inspired by seeing these other things and you felt I want to get there, or what was in your mind?
I think both of those
Mm.
things, having the goal of, I need to be on stage on this date to do this routine, and I need to, not only improve, like that desire to improve and be ready, but also it was kind of fun. I guess it was fun and
Mhm.
it's also focused. And I also, being in Singapore, a lot of my friends were the yoga teachers there. So it's like,
It's kind of natural.
which teacher am I going to see? Which friend am I going to practice with today?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's is a nice community, and if any of our listeners ever hung out with Kay Ha in London, and did yoga and then went out for coffee and food afterwards, I think that you would understand what we're talking about. He's a really fun guy, right? Fun to
Like,
hang out with, fun to practice hard, and eat
but
hard.
eat hard. Yeah,
Yes.
he'll bully you into practice and he'll bully you into eating.
Yeah. All right. So Gloria, tell us to the naysayers about yoga and competition, what would you say is the value or the benefit of competition?
So I think with competition, I mean, any sport and competition, winning is nice, but it's not necessarily the key outcome, right? Because it's all the training that happens before. You know, for me, when I compete, it's all about how much can I do, like how much can I better myself, not necessarily to beat other people, but where can I take my standard to be better and higher, and a lot of the benefits that you get from competition happen through the practice, physical, mental, spiritual, all of that happens before your 3 minutes on stage, right? The medal or no medal is just the outcome. And I think even if you do win a medal somewhere along the line, it's like nothing for me at least changes. It's like I'm still me. I still go into the hot room every day and have to do my postures and practice. And there's all things that I still want to work on. So it's not like the competition is any type of end goal. I would say
Okay.
it's just a part of the process.
Yeah. And tell us then that 3 minutes on stage when you do that, and all of that training in 1 year leads to this one 3 minute performance, and then if you go to the next round, another 3 minute performance. So what goes through your mind in those 3 minutes on stage?
Um, I try to just focus on doing my postures because it's really nerve-wracking before you get on stage, and it's pretty nerve-wracking. It's weird because I mean you've competed, right? Like before you get on stage, you tell yourself all these things like I'm fine, it's great, and then you get on stage and you're the first thing you're like, wow, there's all these people, there's bright lights, I got to do it. So it's always the first posture for me. It's like when I just focus on breathing. And back when I competed, standing head to knee was the first posture. So all the training that I did, it was like, each step of the posture, getting into it, we would count. So I would focus on the counting and the breathing, and that would kind of bring me back to my routine and what I had always practiced before getting on stage.
So getting on stage, was that like doesn't sound like that was a normal thing for you.
No.
Not at all. Yeah, I remember I was speaking to Afton Caraway. I did an earlier talk with her, and she was a dancer. She was in Disney and all kinds of things. She was being on stage was like, oh yeah, that was nothing. She was very, very comfortable on that.
Hmm.
But for you, that was like a different experience.
Yes.
Yeah. So the nerves and that part was probably a big thing to overcome,
Yeah.
and probably something really big. And has that parlayed into your professional life?
Um, Probably. I think it's for me, feeling comfortable with what I know helps a lot in, you know, the nerves and performing and everything. So I think with work and also with yoga, it's the prep beforehand and feeling like I know what I'm gonna do. I've done this before, and like just take a deep breath and do it.
Okay.
And let it. And one of the big things that Kay always taught me before getting on stage is like you have to relax and don't overthink it. And the day before, because early on in the competition I'd be like, well, I can't eat this before I get on stage, I'm gonna be bloated, or I can't do that before. And he's like, who cares, just be normal, eat what you're gonna eat, and go on stage, and don't change your routines. Like whatever you're comfortable with, don't change anything. Because a lot of it is mental, right? Like
Yeah.
if when you make it bigger than it is, then it starts to get in your head.
Yeah. Other than, well, why not just treat it as just any other day?
Right.
Right? And then that shows then that the other 364 days of the year, it was your practice. The 365th day, this thing is also just another practice.
Yeah.
Right? It's simple. But then, but difficult.
Easy.
Easy, so
As
easy.
Deb likes to say, easy. Easy pose.
Wow. So then training, Dev, you mentioned Dev. So let's talk about training with Dev. That I remember my experiences with him were usually on like weekend or 4 or 5 day workshops, and those were so intense. I recall those. And he was like your personal trainer, personal coach for several years. So tell us
Yeah.
about that experience with training with Dev.
Yeah, so I went to his studio, and then I also did private lessons with him. He's intense, as you know, and I think with him, it's like, okay, let me show you how you can do this. And he's not going to let you out of trying.
Yeah.
So I think I would do like an hour session with him, and after 30 minutes, I'm like, okay, I'm tired. And it's like, nope, got to keep going. Do it again.
Yeah, I remember when we brought him over to the United States from Singapore. We had some visa issues, and it came really, really close. And he almost, we had been planning this trip for him to come to the U.S. in, I think it was 2015 or 2016, and he barely just made it on the
Oh
plane
yeah.
to get here. And so we were in Austin, and along with you and Kay, and that was really tons and tons of fun. Was Teresa there too? Did she come? That was another year, I think.
I think, yeah, there's once that she came and the once that she couldn't
Okay.
make it.
And I remember us training at during the day, and then we would come back to our house and train some more. And he kept looking for people who wanted to come back to the house and train, and everybody was trying to avoid him and not and make reasons not to show up.
Yeah, he loves teaching yoga.
Yeah. And I remember having to do so many handstands at home until I just couldn't do anymore. And he kept, and then pushing and pushing, and he would just push, because what he was so skilled at, both he and Kay and Teresa were like, what that body was capable of doing, and just pushing it just to the edge and maybe a little bit more, and showing that body what was
Yeah,
possible.
yeah,
And it's just like hands-on assists in Ashtanga class.
yeah,
Same idea, same
yeah,
concept. Where can your body go? And they were so good at sensing that and
yeah.
feeling it.
Yeah, and I think, early days with Bikram teaching, it wasn't a lot of, it's not moving the body with the hands.
Yeah.
So like when I train with Dev, he's definitely a lot more physical about like, okay, you're gonna grab here, grab there. And whereas Kay's training was very, Kay is very loud.
Yeah.
And once I was with him in London, and he was like yelling at somebody to do something. It was like, I said, Kay, why do you have to yell so loud? And he's like, I have to override all the words going through their own head. It's like, when you're doing
Yeah.
a posture and it's hard, and all like your brain is saying something, and he's just yelling to override all that chatter in your head. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I'm like, why do you always say stuff that makes sense afterwards?
I think my first exposure to Dev was in Prague, and we went to Teresa's studio there, unbelievable experience. I love the Prague studio. I love the energy there, the people there. They're
They're
hardcore,
hardcore.
hardcore practitioners. And Teresa is just a hardcore teacher, amazing teacher. And we went out there. Kay said, "Hey, you guys have to come out." And Marty and I went out there. We met Dev. You were there. Teresa was there. Juan was there.
Yep.
And that was probably the most intense 5 days of training I ever experienced. And that was in 2015. And I remember seeing Dev and Kay and Teresa putting Marty into all these different shapes. And it would make me very nervous because I thought, uh-oh, she's gonna break, something's gonna break, but nothing broke, and these guys, just like I said, knew exactly how far to take it,
Yeah.
and then they would push me, and I just had all this stuff in the way, and I couldn't do it, and they would just keep pushing, but it was eye-opening to understand and to see their methods, and
Yeah.
it really got me interested in the idea of hands-on assists, and later on when I did Ashtanga, with more of that with David Swenson, it really kind of helped inform me like, yes, these things are good.
Yeah. I mean, definitely like the manual manipulation can be helpful. I mean, not like trying to break you or anything, but like getting your body to feel what it's supposed to be doing is very different. So, yeah.
I think in the earlier days, in the younger days, I think our bodies could get away with it to a degree, right?
Yeah.
And we could, and that's something that I think our listeners should probably understand and embrace. And these are things that I'm feeling right now is, rewind 10, 15, 20 years ago, you feel invincible. And you're still in those early days of training and consuming and living. And I'm feeling also as I get older that I can't take those liberties anymore, and I have to be more realistic about what I eat, how I eat, when I eat, and then also how I practice, because my practice has definitely dialed down and evolved as the body starts to get a little bit more mileage on it.
Yeah. Definitely.
So it's like, even
Like,
like, tell us about like your running. So like when you're running, like, do you run anymore now, or do you
yeah,
still?
actually, probably 5 years, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe right around COVID. Actually, I started going back to running because all the studios shut down during that period, and I'm like, I want to do something physical. I wonder if, and also, I was still in New York at that time, and I was running after the train one day, and then I was just like really out of breath, like my legs hurt. I'm like, I lost all my fast twitch muscles. I wonder if I can run again. So I just started really easy. Like, can I make it 1 mile? So now I've been running. I don't think I'm ever going to go back to doing marathons because it's so hard on your body, and I don't think my ankles would take it anymore. But I do like, you know, 3 to 6 miles during a run now, and maybe 3 to 4 times a week, um, just like before work,
That's pretty good.
time. But after I do my run, I always do my yoga postures as well, or at least like stretch and try to keep my mobility up as well.
So after, so you did a lot of yoga training, but you also did a teacher training, right? And where and when did you do that?
So my first teacher training that I did was with Dev in Nepal. And then I did a teacher training with Mati Ezrati in New York. I guess the late Mati, she passed away. And then I've done several other with Dev that are like shorter, not as formal, full length teacher trainings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you could probably say that Dev is your kind of principal or primary, yoga teacher, kind of influencing you that way. So your classes would be informed by him.
Yeah, I think with him and also Kay, because I spent so much time with Kay. Like I would still say my main um, practice is Bikram based, even though I think the teaching style, in terms of like instruction and stuff, might be a mix of like Dev and Kane,
Yeah.
because I spent a lot of time with both of them.
Yeah. And so you're here in Dallas now, and you practice, you run, you practice, you work, and tell us about your professional career, because you're a brilliant person, and so I think people need to know, like you're an everyday, person in the world, and yoga is, part of your life that helps support your life, right? And physical activity. So what
Yeah.
do you do? What do you do professionally?
So I work for a automotive technology company. It's owned by a private equity firm, and I oversee the financial planning and analysis team.
Uh-huh. So you're one
So
of those financial folks, like I
I'm
was.
like, I like the analytics and Excel and data.
Mhm. So that probably, that kind of data mindset, also like the numbers and the step-by-step progression, that's kind of in your personality, that's in your DNA. So when you were probably growing up, your parents, everybody, we've always talked about like
Yeah.
how our tiger moms kind of influenced us and pushed us into just that was never good enough,
Yeah.
right? It's never good enough. Not do it again, do it over. So we're used to that
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah. Being like having high standards of ourselves, I
Mhm.
think, and try to practice and perfect. And I think for me, I'm always, when I'm doing my postures, I'm like trying to not only understand the posture, but my body doing the posture. Like, what is my, you know, what could I improve more? Or, oh, I feel like this area is a little bit tight. Why? Or, this morning when we were doing balancing stick, I felt my trapezius muscles were really clenching. And I'm like, probably later on today, I'll go back and do a balancing stick and see, try to diagnose, like, why am I using those muscles? Can I release that? So trying to understand better about, not only the postures, but what my body is doing. So that kind of like analytical
Yeah.
mindset.
All right. So how does you and today your practice today, because clearly, after training so much, practicing twice a day for so long, then winning yoga championships, then today your practice, we can't do what we used to do maybe 10 or 12 years ago. How do you feel after a class? How do you feel going in? And what is that? What is it? What is knowing like what you were able to do before kind of, does it change anything or influence anything in the way you approach your practice today?
Um, I mean, I don't, it's nice knowing what I could do before.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I could get there again, probably not. I think that if I practice like I used to, I don't know if that's really possible or healthy at this point, but I could probably get kind of close.
Okay.
But I think for me now, I like having where my body is now actually helps me to understand other people and what they're going through, because I think um, when you know I can't even really remember. When I started in 2008. I wasn't super flexible, but I can't even really remember that. You know, all the things I went through to progress, because I was just like working and working, working, and now going back a little bit, I'm like, oh, this is how other people may feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
so I mean, I think I always feel great after class. Every time I do a class in the hot room, I'm like, I should come back more often.
So what are they doing now? What's Kay and Dev doing now?
I think they're both still doing their retreats
Okay.
and teaching. Kay does teaching online as well,
Okay.
although a lot of the timing is European time. So he's like, you can wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But I'll do class with him Sunday mornings. We do advanced.
All right. You do advanced class with Kay on Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. On
It's a
Zoom.
reasonable time at 8 a.m. It's not, some of the other times are either during work time or like 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning.
Very
I
cool.
mean, he's like, just wake up and then you can go back to sleep. I'm like, no.
Maybe Marty and I will check it out one day. So we'll make sure you're on so that way we don't get
Okay,
any
let me
undue
know.
attention. We'll plan it. We'll
No,
get
if you guys get on, he'll definitely, all the attention will be on you.
All right, we'll
He'll
need to
be
have a
so
few more.
excited.
Yeah. All right.
I definitely know he misses you.
We miss him too. So one of these days when he comes back to Houston, we'll have to have another reunion in Austin.
Yeah.
So then let's go back a little bit further in time. So then in 2014, you win the championships again, right? The second time, and the middle year 2013, you weren't allowed back in because back then, once you won it, you couldn't come back again. But then 2014, you come back and you win it again, and that was great. And then they start changing the format of the yoga championships, the International Yoga Sports Federation, the IYSF. And then you sit on that board and you're part of that technical rules committee. And the idea there was to standardize the way that these postures were performed and then judged, sort of like I guess you could most closely associate it with like a Olympic gymnastics
Right.
kind of format.
Yeah.
Right. So tell us more about that whole rule set, which still lives today.
Yes. And I think at that time there was a desire to have yoga be put up as an Olympic sport. So that's why we had the technical committee and we wrote all the rules so that it would be um, presentable up to the standard to the Olympic board. Um, and I think that having the rule book is great, not only for the judges, but also for the athletes, because you know what to expect, right? Like, I think in the early days, it was like word of mouth, like what you have to find the right teacher or the right person who knows what the judges are looking for. But now it's public and it's open, so it's accessible to anybody on the Yoga Federation website.
Yeah. And it still is up there, right?
Yep.
And I know that you were in that, Dev, Kay, Jared, and Juan wasn't. Well, no, I think the four of you were in that, or were in the manual, right?
Yeah.
Demonstrating the postures.
And I think since then they've evolved it as well.
Have they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Brandy's in it, also a past champion.
Okay. So that must have been pretty fun to work through, memorialize, and so your knowledge of these very advanced postures and what people look for, how to approach it, how to get in, how to get out, but also the training that you underwent to achieve, most of those or many of those is all still in your head and in your body, right?
Yep.
Yep. So have you ever thought, to coach other people or is that just like you're too busy?
Yeah, I would coach other people. I think now I'm on the judges committee for USA Yoga, so they have rules about like coaching and judging.
Oh,
So
okay.
they've kind of separated those two. Like you can't, I think it's like you can't coach someone more than a certain amount of time, like maybe an hour or 2 hours, and still be eligible judge because they don't want the conflict of interest.
Makes sense.
But I'm always open to working with people.
All right. And then I guess people can do that like live here in Dallas or on Zoom or
Sure,
something.
yeah.
Yep. Uh-huh. Now, so you moved to Dallas, about a year or 2 years ago? 2 years
two and a
ago?
half years ago.
2.5 years ago. It's been that long. And so work is here. All right. So what then do you indulge in when you're here in Dallas?
I'd say my biggest indulgence is nothing Bunt cake. I mean, coming from New York, where I love pastries and sweets, which, as you mentioned, like getting older, I have to be careful about eating too much of things. Like I think I go like I look back and I'm like, was that so good that I ate cronuts and donuts and like basically every day? But yeah, I allow myself nothing but cake for
Nothing Bunt cake. All right. Well,
my indulgence.
that's a good one. We'll see you on USA Yoga events, probably.
Yep.
Right? Do you do any demonstrations while you're
Not
out there?
anymore.
Not anymore? I think you need to train and get back on there and do some demos for people.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Get back. Kay's like, you have to get back into shape. So I'll see Kay in July. We're going to be in Portugal for his retreat. So I'm sure he'll push me back into it,
Yeah.
into postures.
All right. Well, super good. That is a wonderful conversation, a wonderful way to catch up.
Yeah.
And Gloria?
Thank you,
Gloria
Jeff.
Suen,
Do you have
thanks
any
for coming.
recommendations for barbecue?
Oh, I'm just a big Terry Black's fan.
Okay.
And Pecan Lodge. Pecan Lodge is
I've
super
heard.
good too.
Actually, I went there with Jared
Ah,
early on.
all right.
That's pretty good.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll get you back here on this podium, maybe leading a workshop here at the Dallas studio. That would be lots of fun, right? Right, Lane? All
Sounds
right.
good.
So thank you, everybody. This is Pure Yoga Talk. I'm Jeff with Gloria. Have a great, great, great time. See you on Zoom. See you on YouTube. Remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, all those good things. See you soon.